I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. These are powerful and prolific words of Dr. Martin Luther King at his December 1964 Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech. Dr. King's fight for civil equality has been recounted and adopted 1,000,000 times over. But did you ever consider that music and artists taking similar stands could breed such impactful results? In 1869, the Supreme Court ruled that segregation of races was legal, with the ominous phrase, separate but equal. However, in 1954, the United States Supreme Court ruled against segregation in schools. But this didn't bring societal harmony by any means. Here are just a few instances where music played a role in changing race relations. On April 10, 1956, legendary jazz singer-songwriter Nat King Cole was violently attacked while performing on stage when he was jumped by several angry white men. As it would turn out, this was a premeditated attack by the White Citizens Council. Even though Mr. Cole knew the risk as an African-American performer performing in a hotbed of racist inequality that was 1950s Alabama, he agreed to perform for his loyal fans anyway. In 1961, after receiving a telegram from students at Payne College notifying Ray Charles that his African-American fans could only attend his performance if they sat in the balcony, Charles tried to strike a deal with the organizers, recognizing that city officials were unlikely to permit white and black patrons to sit together. Charles challenged the assumption that the black patrons should always be given the worst accommodations. When management refused to consider this arrangement, Charles announced that he would be canceling his performance. In response, the promoter sued Charles for breach of contract and won a judgment against the performer. But all was not lost. Just 2 years later, Charles was invited back to the Bell Auditorium, where he had performed before an integrated audience.
Hold on. He's right. He's right, Jeff. Get him on the bus.
He's so right.
Get him back on the bus.
Y'all heard him? Y'all heard, right? Back on the bus, everybody. Everybody back on the bus.
Are you serious? Get him on the bus.
Ray Charles was quoted by saying, "I feel that it's the least I can do, to stand up behind my principles and help the students in their fight for their principles." But rock music did not rid all of America's youth of the prejudices held by generations before them. But it did impact many of them, and in some, it may have just started the process. Soon, these teenagers, the baby boomers, would reach voting age, and it is no surprise that some of the most sweeping civil rights reforms took place as this happened. A great example of this is the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which effectively outlaws segregation in the U.S., thereby allowing the government to enforce integration. While the civil rights movement would have continued without rock and roll, the influence of the genre and its artists on the minds of the nation's young people was vast. Without its influence, it probably would have taken much longer to break down the barriers that the genre helped tear away. But it's important to note that it wasn't only African American artists that took a staunch position against racial injustice. The Beatles, the Fab Four themselves, took a very strong stance and refused to play a concert to a segregated audience during a visit to the U.S. in 1965. Ahead of a gig at the Cow Palace in Daly City, California, the Liverpudlian band believed to have inserted the request into their rider. The quartet insisted that they would not perform for a segregated audience. "We never play to segregated audiences, and we aren't going to start now," said John Lennon. "I'd sooner lose our appearance money." That same year also saw Rosa Parks, a black civil rights activist, refuse to give up her seat on a local bus, which sparked a year-long boycott of transport services by the black community. These are just some of the countless examples of when artists have taken stands against what had been considered the norm in society. But without their acts of bravery and courage in the face of adversity and insurmountable odds, it is a strong possibility that history may have had a much different outcome.